Hello, good evening everyone. And welcome to this evening's play briefing for Return to the Dirt by Steve Pirie. Woo! Before we begin tonight, I'd just like to honour the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Turrbal and Yagara people. This has always been a place of storytelling. Thank you to our principal partner, RACQ, and the Queensland Government for their support of the Queensland Premier's Drama Award, of which this play is the proud winner. Yes. No, I'm not Lee Lewis. My name is Daniel Evans. I'm an associate artist here at Queensland Theatre, and it is my pleasure to be with you all tonight. Lee is, of course, in the director's seat tonight, which is why I'm here. So the tables have sort of turned, and we get to ask her all of our burning questions about this award-winning play. This season began in a small town called Grover's Corners in Thornton Wilder's great American play, Our Town. And we close out season 2021 a little closer to home in a new great Australian play called Return to the Dirt by Steve Pirie, who is also here and in the play. Steve, well done. Congratulations again. This is a big moment.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? Temperature check. How are you?
Temperature check, things are running hot in here in the Octagon. No, it's a mountain to climb, and it's one of those things when I realised I thought it'd be a fun idea to kind of include myself in the play because I just wanted as many costume changes as I could do. And then I realised I actually had to do things on stage, and then that became a challenge of its own. So look, it means that I don't get to sit on opening night in the audience and be terrified. Or in the bar, which is that's another problem in its own. But I might see you there at interval, depending on how the show's going.
Amazing. Well, the opening and closing plays of this year's season are linked by big questions. How do you measure a life? What do we hold on to in times of crisis? Who are we and who do we turn to when life ends? And in the case of this play particularly, why do we do death so badly? Return to the Dirt follows a playwright called Steve, who conjures a version of himself called Steve, as he recalls his one-year sea change, if we'd call it that, to Toowoomba, where he traded his life in the theatre for life in a funeral home, where he became an undertaker. In this autobiographical, very, very funny and very, very moving play, Steve draws back the curtain on the big business of the funeral industry and in the process wrestles with exercising some of his own personal demons. So tonight we have the fabulous cast and crew of Return to the Dirt here to meet you, and they're ready to roll up their sleeves and talk about how this new work has gone from the experience of, or how they've taken this play from idea to page to stage. Into this kind of heartbreaking production that they've revealed. So let's meet them. We might go down the line from the very end. If you can say your name and tell us how you're involved in the production.
My name is Mitchell Burke. It's lovely to meet you all. And I'm playing Steve, which has been an eye-opening experience, to say the least. But such an honour and a privilege to have been put here by Lee and Steve and all the people at Queensland Theatre. But yeah, more will be revealed later on, but that is me, Mitchell Burke. Over to you.
Hello everyone, I am Julian Starr and I'm the composer and sound designer for Return to the Dirt, or the maestro, so yeah, either way.
Hi, my name's Ben Hughes. I'm the lighting designer of the production.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sophie Cox, and I play Claire.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Miyuki Lotz. I play Beck, Jess, Lucy, and a plethora of other characters.
I'm Steve. I wrote the play.
He also plays the caddy and the Frenchman. Yeah. When he originally wrote the play, the earlier draft, there was a whole 2 pages of him speaking French, and then he realised he doesn't speak French, and so he decided to turn it into an English section. So I'm Lee, and I'm directing. Yeah. Oh, yes, you can have that one.
I'm Jeanette Cronin, and I play Deb, a funeral director and mentor to Steve, and a few other little surprise packet characters.
I'm Chris Baz. I play Greg and Terry and a whole lot of other people, not Steve. And anyway.
Hi, my name's Renee Mulder, and I am the set and costume designer.
Oh, thank you. What a team. What a team. Steve, first question's for you. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit about how this went from being an experience that happened to you, into 2, 5, 8, 10 years later, wherever you are now, and into how it's going to open into a production that's going to be experienced by all of us next week? What was that kind of journey like? How did you traverse that?
Yeah, I think with a lot of these stories that are being told, when you look at autobiographical and semi-autobiographical theatre in particular, generally you'll find that it takes a bit of time for the ideas to settle. So I think we're now coming up to, 2021? So it's been about 7 years since the play begins. So the play starts at the end of 2014 and finishes at the end of 2016. So it's about 18 months or so. And once enough time has passed and everything that you want to say, you have to kind of wait until everything just settles before you can start to sort through the ideas of what's interesting. And then what actually happened was it started here at Queensland Theatre. In 2017, there was a call out for independent artists working in the city to come forward with an idea and essentially just asking for what you needed. And all I asked for, I had an idea for this play. I said, I think I want to write about a funeral home because I think that opens the door for a lot of discussions that I think are overdue for how we deal with this particular world. And I asked for a desk, basically. I sat in the back corner of Queensland Theatre and I just stared at a screen for a little while and waited for something to happen. Which is, if any of you who have tried and just see the little blinking cursor on page 1, and then I just go and do something else for a while and then come back and hope that something has appeared. But I worked to a first draft. I worked with a dramaturg here named Paige Rashray, who you would have seen direct many other productions here, or if any of you have spent any time with STC over the past time, you'll see her work. We worked together. We sat on a couch and read the first draft, and then we had a short showing for about 20 people. And then from there, it's kind of grown and developed. And I think what you're going to end up seeing will probably be about the 6th draft of Return to the Dirt. And over that time, it's changed, and some layers have been put in between what my lived experience is and what we wanted to massage into the story, because it's much more about the conversations that we want to have as opposed to what actually happens to Steve in the play. Steve is the conduit for the rest of the conversation to happen.
Great. Lee, you have been on the record, I'm going to quote you back to yourself. You've been on the record and you said, this is one of the most exciting plays I've read in recent time. What first struck you about the play? And has anything about the play surprised you as you've taken it into the rehearsal room?
When I first read it, I was stunned by the enormous heart in it that was tempered with a philosophy. And sometimes there's a huge amount of emotion in plays, but not a container to hold the emotion. And what I found was a form that actually knew how to hold the heart. So it wasn't messy emotion, it was channeled into actually saying something, because he had a sense of what he wanted to say to us right now, and a way to say it in such a way we could hear it. So it felt very full and ready to speak, and that's why I found it really exciting. It wasn't a great idea that hadn't found a form yet and was struggling. It wasn't a great form that didn't know what it wanted to say. It had all the elements. And so for the last 2 years, it's really been about giving Steve the space and time to just strip away the elements that he didn't need, as opposed to find the ones that he did. And that was an exciting time to come into a work. So that's why I was genuinely excited. It's a big play. It's not small. There are a lot of people trying to write that 90-minute no interval play that has punch. This is an old school play. It's two halves where the second half really delivers some big thoughts in there, and I found that really impressive. So I stand by what I said. There are a lot more props in the play than I anticipated, and they're really specific, which is slightly aggravating. So there's always that funny thing. It's a beautiful read as a play. When you read this thing, it flows really beautifully, and there's sort of a magical flow to it. And when you try and stage the damn thing, you kind of go, how do I get the gurney on stage in a flowing way? So that's been a little bit surprising, but that's all right.
Amazing. I'm going to ask Mitchell and maybe both the Steves. Can you tell us what exactly happens in the play? What's the story, or what can our audience expect when they come along to watch it? No pressure.
Yeah. Well, I'm 24 right now, and Steve was my age when he moved back to Toowoomba with his fiancée at the time, Claire. And essentially it's about just a young man who loves the theatre and made a deal with his partner that they would do whatever it takes to get through the wedding and get through this time in their lives so that they can come out on top and do what they really love. So I guess it's...
So he gets a day job.
Yeah, right, a day job. He does. He gets a day job at a funeral home, and all these situations and questions start popping up to him, and he has to deal with them basically just as they arrive. And we see him juggle that, as well as his own demons, as well as trying to maintain a relationship at the same time. And that's such a, I mean, everyone goes through that, but in this capacity, it's like trying to go, he's running a race that's just unwinnable. Yeah. I guess
that was like the cruelest question to ask.
I know,
Okay,
I'm
so we're just about to go into tech.
Yeah, I've been going through a lot.
I think you did a very good job. That's very good.
Yeah, that's okay, but it's good. This is Steve. Like, I'm being Steve right now because he's really struggling his way to figure out how to deal
He's
with
crushing it.
things.
He's crushing it.
He's finding the right answers.
Yeah.
He's finding the right answers.
Luckily, I got it all together now.
Yeah.
I've got it all figured out.
Steve's my idol. Yeah.
I think this is the thing, because I mean we all have a 25-year-old in our lives right now, right? Or you all know someone who's 25, or you might be 25. You know they've all got it together and they've got it figured out. But it actually is.
Or we try to tell ourselves we do.
It actually is that point where you've come out of university, or you've come out of the first quarter of your life, and you think you have everything figured out, but then everything starts to fall apart. So it's actually the beginning of the play is actually when Steve is coming on the back end of a career burnout, and then having to start again in this idea of not actually knowing what you're meant to be doing or what your purpose is, and then thrown into this job where it's very different to any other day job where you can just take it at home. It stays with you all the time, and it's both a blessing and a curse. And the whole play wrestles with this, is about what happens when you are given something that's much bigger than just a day-to-day job, and how you carry that with you, and how do you ask the people around you to help you carry that. So he kind of goes in, this babe in the woods, and exits the play a very different man. And I think it's quite rare, particularly in Australian theatre, to tell stories about young men that aren't about violence, or aren't about aggression. It's just simply about young men trying to be. And also particularly where one of the core relationships in the play is non-romantic, and is actually with someone from a different generation too, which is one of my favourite parts of the text as well.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the primary relationships, so Steve does have a wedding that he's working towards, but he's also paired with a much older funeral director named Deb, who's been doing it for quite a while. And
Not that much older.
yeah. Well, yeah, like
No, that much older.
who becomes kind of quite a dear friend to Steve. The actual woman is actually based off 4 women that I worked with, and I'm very grateful to. Who spent some time with in the place that I worked with, which was a gorgeous place to be, and taught me some really formative lessons. And that's all kind of guided through this character, who kind of takes Steve under a wing a bit and shows him a little bit about how everything works, not just about the home, but just about how to be a person again. I think more than
I love the
else.
character of Deb. Can you tell us about the character of Deb? She's a beautifully written character. I love her.
Yeah, she's gorgeous. I describe her as the person you want to share a trench with, you know? Yeah. She'd take a bullet for you. She sees this job as her vocation and a place where she can make a difference in people's lives. So she is affected by it, and I suppose, like everyone, she tries not to take it home, but she is available and able to give. And she has that capacity. So when this young man arrives, she kind of falls in love with him in a way, because she can sort of see into him a little bit. And as it develops, she begins to understand his demons and the depths of his needs. And she's very much there for him, like she's there for the people who come in with their loved ones, you know. So she's pretty lovely, and she's very naughty. Yeah. So.
Amazing. You were saying before, Steve, that Deb's based on a composite of like 4 women. My next question is for Sophie. I feel a bit like Tracy Grimshaw tonight, asking all the hard questions. But is it? I was going to ask you. So, is it? Did you? Because you're playing Claire.
Yes, I am.
A real person.
Yes,
someone
she's
that
very real.
Yes, I know. Was there any pressure there, particularly that Steve's in the room? Or how did the team negotiate the fact that it's quite autobiographical?
Well, it's sort of, but
Yeah.
actually not. Yeah. It's also a fiction, and this is, it's interesting. The play Claire diverges from real Claire quite significantly, and she serves a play because this is it's based on a wisdom that was gathered in a time, but it's still got to be a fiction, and there's a good story to tell, and there are details, I suppose, of the Claire and Steve relationship that are just for the stage. And you're probably the only person that knows the differences, and the only one who
I'm
ever
not going
should.
to tell. That's for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it has been challenging playing a real person. I sort of, to begin with, I tried to put that as far away from my brain as possible, and just looked at the paper and thought, okay, well, this is the character I'm playing. And it's written beautifully, so it hasn't been challenging at all to sort of breathe life into it, because she's there. And I mean, I met Claire the other day. She's very nice. I didn't want to meet her before the run because I was too nervous. But yeah, she's very different from who she is in the play.
Yeah, and it is the gorgeous thing about what makes theatre is we don't necessarily have to do that. I mean, if we were talking about a film version of this, you would hear all the legends, because we like to tell those myths about, Daniel Day-Lewis disappearing into things and reappearing in some way. And it's not so much like, you won't see Mitch doing an imitation of me. He's simply just taking what was given to him in the text and making a version, because you will see me on the stage. So there's 2 different things, and that's exactly the way that it's meant to be. It's what the form is. It's a play that messes around with time, and it's a play that messes around with memory, and it's a play that messes around with big ideas in this giant space, and that's what theatre does best. So, and that's what excites me as an artist, particularly who makes theatre. We really lean into the things that we can't do anywhere else, and you'll see a lot of that in this.
Right. I'm going to come to some of the crew or creators now. Renee Mulder, who's sitting right beside me, has reassembled after the huge task of Boy Swallows Universe. It is here, or the shadow of Renee Mulder is here. Well done on that show. It was brilliant, amazing, so good, and such a big job. I'm interested, again, we're on a revolve. Again, this is a
Wow.
very
Yes, we are. We are.
This is
We
a very
are.
different world. What kind of has informed this aesthetic that we see kind of in its? Okay, is it building blocks? I guess at the moment, but where's this come from? This kind of vision.
Well, the very first scene of the play, we start in the kind of waiting room or atrium of a funeral home. So we sort of took the initial inspiration from that place or space, which is, obviously not the revolve on the floor, but, you've the curtains, the ferns on plinths, the classical kind of, the very sort of traditional sort of elements within that environment. Because also, not too dissimilar to Boy in a way, we are very fluid with time, space and memory. And again, it's the idea of one place that can serve multiple locations. So that's sort of the world we're in, except we're in a much more intimate space and a much softer space.
It is
and fewer drugs. Let's be
Yes.
honest.
Way less drugs.
Far less heroin.
But
on
And
the
no
stage.
scoop shorts.
No scoops.
Yes.
Yeah,
And more props.
I mean, probably on par. Probably the
What's
similar
your
amount.
favourite prop in this production? Because there's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there. I'm just gonna say there's one gnome that I'm particularly fond of.
A garden gnome?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Amazing. I guess I'll throw this out to the rest of the team, but I'm just interested, you mentioned a funeral home, and death is obviously a big theme in this, and so is the process of death. Without getting too dark, but what's probably the most surprising or perhaps illuminating aspect of that process of death that perhaps you've learnt through this process? I'll throw that out to anyone.
Oh my God, get yourself a prepaid funeral. I had no idea how expensive it all was. So actually, you go home from this with some straightforward practicalities about what you should be doing. I tell you,
Christmas is coming up.
I'm serious. No, it was there's a whole little sequence where he talks about the funeral industry and costs and hidden costs and all of this. And then he says, the best thing you could do is get a prepaid funeral. Didn't you have one that was bought in 1970 or something?
That's foresight.
Yeah. There's a few different places that do it and will actually honour the price. So I think I remember doing one that I think would have cost maybe $300 in 1982. So yeah, they got a good deal.
So I am thinking Christmas.
Yeah.
Mum, Dad.
My gosh, gift voucher. Gosh, goodness me. No socks this year. What about Chris? Did you learn anything? Because you kind of run the funeral home. Your character does.
That's
Did
right.
you learn anything kind of illuminating besides?
Oh, well, yes.
Christmas
Well, there's
gifts?
quite a few things, but I was never really aware that funeral directors are like first responders, they go out to an accident or to the hospital and they've actually, so there's a lot of trauma involved and they've got to, transport the body without sort of going into too many details, and I was, obviously I've been to funerals and family members have died, etc., but I never even thought about it, that they actually have to be there and take the person into their care, whether they've been, had some tragic accident or whatever it is, and it'd be it's quite a traumatic job.
It's really been interesting, hasn't it? Also, because it's not a comedy at the expense of the funeral industry or the funeral directors. That was what's been interesting, is how Steve all the way through has been guiding the work to talk about the dignity that the funeral directors work to give to those who've died and to the families, and how the work to do that. And that's been really interesting, that window into that world and the nature of that work.
Yeah, right. Ben Hughes.
Also recovering from Boy Swallows
I
Universe.
know. I was just going to say another Boy Swallows Universe survivor. Feels like a survivors club. Well done, you made it. Ben, I'm interested in it just in terms of how does a creative, obviously we're back in the Bill Brown, and coming out of that other huge show. Does your philosophy kind of change, or where do you start with a work like this compared to Boy? Is it because this feels just as ambitious in some ways as well? In terms of, as Renee was saying, the slipperiness of world, and we move from funeral home to hospital, home to home. How do you mould space in a work like this one?
so much of it comes from, how it's staged and how Lee's putting it together, and then finding a way to, for this play, I think there is this incredible fluidity of how it has to work all the time, and there are times when people just wander through this space, and they're not there, but they're still in the same. They're still in the same play, but they're in a completely different world. But they have to be able to just wander through the stage, and those kind of things. You try a few different options. You think about a couple of different ways you might approach it, and then hopefully you lock in on the one that actually works for the play in that particular moment. But I think to answer that question, it's really finding what this play needs, switching between different ones. Like it's not. You never go in with a preconceived idea. You have a few things you read off the page, and then you see what comes out of the room with the actors and the director.
There are also things that are possible in this space that aren't in a proscenium. Yeah, it's quite a beautiful play to immerse people in, and we're much closer to the characters than you can get at the Playhouse. Yeah. That feeling of being there with them, and design-wise, we've also pushed quite close to the audience for this one. We're not really using that back corner very much, so it'll seem like a much smaller space. Yeah.
Stunning.
It's quite an intimate space when it's actually pushed forward this far. It's really, compared to coming out of the Playhouse where it is so presentational and so big, and actors are playing to audience that is, 3 times as far back as the back row is here. It's a really different feeling.
Yeah, great. I suppose equal to light and defining worldly. I'm interested in the conversation perhaps you had with Julian about how to shift spaces.
Poor Julian. Poor Julian.
I know. How many sound cues are you up to?
We talked, the early conversations about the play were about, how do you support and grow that psychological space that is Steve when it's shared between Steve playwright and Steve actor. How does that grow? So we got into some quite complex conversations at the beginning, and now we're at the crunchy bit where tech is about to start. And I'm going, no, the cow sound doesn't sound right. It needs to be more like moo, and I'm making ridiculous sounds at him and getting it. And actually, later on, I'm going to exploit you all, actually, because I need the sound of a crowd in here. So I'm going to steal all of your performances and put them into the play, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Poor Julian is all I keep thinking.
Yeah, it's usually now I start turning off around about 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, because it comes to that process of, with composers and sound designers, give us moving images, and then that's when the musical ideas all come together. And we're being quite fortunate this week where we have been rehearsing in this space and on this stage, and I guess it's been beneficial for all of us because the actors can, learn, how the revolve works and their ins and outs, whereas I can sit and just listen and compose around that. But like all things, what we've been discussing, my job, it goes back to one word: story. You read the story, and again, like as Lee was saying, weeks ago we had many in-depth conversations of what is the sound world, and it's not until you hit those first few weeks of rehearsals you learn what the tone is, and that's what we're all trying to do, is find what that tone is of the play, and then, as Ben said, you find an idea and you start running with that. And especially, the subject matter of the play, around death and music, it's something we all connect to at the end of the day in some way or another. And then, you finding pre-existing songs and, merging them into our world, and then for me to kind of work my magic all around that. So for this one, again, we've talked about like a lot of fluidity of the characters. And again, my philosophy as a composer, every show I do, I try and set out to do something new and different and exciting. And I'm using the piano, but I'm using a number of pianos. So I've got one piano, which is my main piano, and then I've got another 2, 3, 4 other pianos tied to that. So it's kind of creating a reverb, a beautiful palette of sounds, what you'll be able to hear with different characters and so forth. But, you know, I guess as well, for my nature of the play and the intimacy of this venue, you know, speakers and layouts, and I'm doing another interesting thing where I've got a number of speakers hidden around the stage and up in the air and all behind all of you. So I work in a very immersive realm and all of that. So again, it's a very interesting world what we're all creating, and again, the sound and the music is just one element. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Amazing. All right, I'm coming for questions out in the audience in one question's time. Miyuki, I've got a question for you, because in that introduction, I was like watching you list off those characters, and I was speaking at the back, and it sounds like you have umpteen costume changes. I'm so interested, as a performer, is that the craft of what you do? Is it kind of coming off stage and going, right, where am I going next? Like, how chaotic is it going to get for you back there? Have you thought about that yet? Or does it take approaches? Are you like, calm, serenity now, or where are you at?
I wish. Yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be embodied and planned out when you have that many quick changes, and then there's that many props coming on and off a revolve backstage. So there's a lot of footwork that's happening between myself and the ASMs to make sure that we're all being on cue, because I never miss a cue. Oh my God. Yeah, but it's definitely a full body experience, and it's a lot of fun, actually. It's going to keep me on my toes. I'll never be on autopilot for this show.
Oh my gosh, can I ask you a very selfish question? What is the quickest change that you have? Do you know yet? Is it like 8 seconds, 10 seconds?
I actually haven't timed it yet, but
gosh.
I think it is quick. Hang on. It's nurse to brother, sister. What's
It'll
that?
be fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine. Yeah. She dives in. Yeah, it's all Velcro.
Great. Oh, amazing. All right, over to you folks. Questions. Does anyone have any burning questions for any of our creatives about anything you've heard? You can be brave. You don't need to be Tracy Grimshaw if you don't need to be. Hello, yes, question.
Just about the music, you usually associate it with either fanfares, trumpets, or harps. Why piano?
Question was about why piano as opposed to fanfares or harps?
Yeah, interesting. Again, there is a couple of fanfare, like trumpet and brass in the show. Don't get me wrong. And again, I detune it all, and it makes those sounds odd. But harps I haven't actually explored. I was exploring early days of the cymbaloman, actually, just to create some sort of interesting textures. But the piano, I kind of wanted to explore, because with it, you know, it always sounds beautiful, and it's something we can all connect to. Yet, how I also work is I run it through many different effects, reverbs and tape delays, and again, there'll be me at 4 a.m. twiddling knobs and cables and so forth. And it's creating the piano, but then also creating a different tone and texture, and it's just something quite beautiful. And again, it was something what I really wanted to connect us all to at the end of the day, instead of going down at your traditional other instruments, things like guitar and so forth. And again, it was conversation, as I said, like earlier on in the piece with Lee and I in the pre-production process. And again, we're in Toowoomba at the end of the day. So again, do we go down that classic guitar path? But no, as I said earlier on, usually in that first week, you sit and you listen to the words, and you just get the sense of how it's been directed and how the cast are moving around and, you know, dialogue, and then I can just kind of weave in underneath there and not be too distracting and kind of supporting the piece. So, yeah.
Interesting. Anyone else? Yes, over here. Yeah, hello. Hello.
Ooh, some great observations. The symmetry was kind of important in a way that there's a sense of ritual and a sense of, you know, it sort of plays back to the environments of say a funeral home or a space where you're going to sort of congregate to sort of celebrate a life, or, you know, there's like some kind of like that sort of element.
There's a comfort in symmetry. And there are not a lot of spaces where you can actually do symmetrical sets because the spaces are uneven and awkward. So when you can do it, can be a gift to a story.
And as far as the age or the time frame, yeah, we were establishing that this isn't a up to date, you know.
It had a good fit out in the late 90s.
Yeah. That's exactly where we're going. That's exactly where we are.
I'd say it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's not a huge challenge for lighting, in the sense of a design, you take from a design and then that informs how you light a show. So it actually, yes, it might add a challenge, but that challenge actually adds to how you do the piece. So every bit gives you a little bit more that forces a style or pushes a way that you might have to work a little bit. And I find that actually really useful. Otherwise, you've just got too many options. So actually having to have some parameters around it is a good thing. There's a whole lot around up here, and you know, there's a couple more to go in over the coming days, and then we'll put it all together and see what happens.
Good question. Anyone? Yes, hello. Has there been any reaction from the funeral industry, Steve? Yes.
Well, we did think about a sponsor early because there was a function. It must have been a Brisbane business function that I went to, and there was a person there who works in the funeral industry. I said, "Oh, I've got a play for you." Didn't even think about some of the things he said in there. And then, anyway, we started to go down that path, and then actually no, because there is a layer of criticism of the funeral industry. It's not huge, but it's there. And I thought, no, it's better not to ask them and have them read the script and go, no, not to put them in that position. But the play as a whole is actually very respectful of the work of funeral directors, not necessarily of the industry itself.
Yeah. Well, my address is private, so I'm just sticking to me. No, I think I want to make this really clear. My experience in the industry was, for the most part, something that I worked with consummate professionals, and I worked in a place that prioritized care of people. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've all heard horror stories, or you might have come across experiences that may have been less than, and some of those are founded in truth. The funeral industry as a whole, from a personal opinion, it's exceeded at what we asked of it, which was to make death go away. But in a way that perhaps is too efficient. I think what this really focuses on, and the thesis that I put forward, is what happens if we took a very human event out of a corporate structure and placed it back in the hands of a community. Because I'm sure that you might all have an experience, whether you've had an experience planning a funeral, or if you've had one in your family, or if you've helped one. We don't have an experience of that until it happens, and then you're placed on the conveyor belt, and then you're just pushed along. You'll end up in the room where they start asking you all these questions that you've never thought of before, or you might never have thought of before. You have strangers trying to talk to you. You're suddenly standing in a showroom where there are coffins, where you're being asked to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something you've never thought about before. And then you're signing invoices, and then you're being told to show up on this day, and you're being told to talk to all of your family. At the same time, you're trying to process what has just happened, maybe hours before. We had situations where we would go and literally take someone in the middle of the night, and that would be the last time their family would see them until then. Sometimes they asked that, sometimes they didn't. There's no one way to do this properly, but I think there's a lot of ways that we can improve how we do death in this country, particularly in the West. We need more time to process these things. It can't be done in 2 or 3 days like we want it to, as much as we want it to, because sometimes we do just want it to go away. But the problem that I came up against with we had people coming back 6 months later saying, I feel like it just happened yesterday, because you haven't given yourself the time to actually acknowledge that someone isn't there anymore. And I think that's where the industry is failing. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you have a better idea. I hope you're more empowered to make choices and to tell people what you want, or even just to sign something and put it in a shoebox and tell people where it is. That's all that needs to be done. We talk a lot about plays asking big questions, and this does ask big questions, but it offers you a very simple answer too. You can do this in the car ride at home. You can do it in the bar. Tell me, I'll keep it a secret, I don't mind. But talk about it. I think that would be the advice that I would give to anyone who has been through this process, or maybe about to go through this process, or knowing that you will, because we all will. Pass it on. Because unfortunately, when you don't have that choice as a family trying to make a decision, you may feel like you're making the wrong one. And that can be quite confronting. Yeah.
Oof. Beautiful. Beautifully said, Steve. Thank you. I'm going to come back up and around. Oh, repeat question asker. I'm going to come to you with that. I'm going to move along the row. Ask, yes, what's your question? Yep.
Are we talking about cremation or burial?
Are we talking about cremation
Oh,
or
we talk
burial?
about it all.
Oh.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Okay, copy. That's covered. Excellent. Up the back there? Yes. Oh, so big question. How have the performers or perhaps the crew's experiences of death or grief impacted or what they brought to the performance? Anyone want to take that one?
I'll be selfish and jump in. When I first, in my life, since an early age, I've dealt with death a lot in different ways. So when I read the play, that's what I connected to most. And I think that's what really jumped out at me. This is going to sound really weird, but it's an advantage to know the feeling of losing someone when it comes to doing this. But nothing has compared to asking Steve what it's like to not go into a room where someone's bawling their eyes out and help them. The hardest thing to do is not do anything. And to me, so I guess I'm flipping the question, is that's what I learnt from how death has affected me, is to not do anything, because in my life I've always wanted to do something. So, and everyone does. You want to help the person that's grieving, but as a funeral director, you can't. The best thing to do is to let them do what they need to do. But for me, there's a massive connection to death that I've been through that has really shaped who I am and where I am. So I just feel really privileged that I'm able to do this play. Yeah.
Lee asked me that in the audition. I think you said, is there anything in the script to you that is really close to home? And the funny thing about my character in the play, I kind of feel like I'm in my own play. Everybody else is doing a play about a funeral home, but I'm doing a play about planning a wedding. So I have a very different journey. But I think really, the death thing doesn't touch me too much. What does is sort of Steve's health, and that was the thing that I connected with the most, was being the partner of somebody who's not doing that great. Different. I feel like I'm on a sort of a planet that circles the
the reason I was
sun.
asking that at an audition stage was actually acknowledging that there are times where actors shouldn't necessarily do some stories. Sometimes it's too close, and that can actually I think sometimes, and especially in this time where people haven't been working, you say yes to a job because you feel like you have to, or you fear if you don't say yes at this point that the person will never offer you a job again. And I was trying to make sure that people realised it was okay to say no, because if you're too close to some stuff, it can hurt too much to make the play, and I don't want to cause damage to my actors by asking too much of them at the wrong time emotionally. And there's no way to stop it. When you're working on a play that is beautifully written about something like this, it does pull at your heart, and it's your real heart. And yes, you build a fictional character, but your heart doesn't know the difference on a day-to-day basis. So you can actually end up too heart-sore. So, and it's not that people can't make those decisions for themselves, but I was asking because I wanted you to know it was okay to say no to a play.
I said yes.
She said yes. But that's important. And I suppose that question about how do you make sure that your team can survive the plays sometimes, that's an important conversation to have. And I'm not saying that someone couldn't say, oh, you know, it is actually quite close at the moment, but I think I'm okay to do that. I have to trust people as well, but that conversation's got to be on the table from the very beginning. That the process of rehearsal is really about separating out the personal from the play. We used to think of it as you pour all of yourself into it. All of yourself is there from the beginning. And it's how do you pull the self out so that you can live, so you can go home at the end of the day and not take it out on your family. Because
you rise up to meet it. You don't pull it down to meet you, I think. Yeah.
Gorgeous. Love that. A couple more questions. Yes. In the red, yes.
No, this play had quite a lot of development. So Steve had seen a lot of people reading the different roles, and every time we did a reading, we tried to get different people in so that it wasn't about, so that he was pulling on the different intelligences of different actors and different questions at different times. So it wasn't locked into particular people, which was really quite lovely. I mean, I had to have him. He was the given. But then we did audition quite a large number of people for different roles. Sam French, who's the head of casting here, gathered together a lot of different people. And it was really about trying to find the right combination of people, which is often what it is. I tend to not have people in mind because the theatre being what it is, and in relation to film and television, you lose people can't do it, and I hate that feeling of, oh, I can't do this play because that person isn't available. I always think that's a bit bullshit, actually. We've got a lot of really great actors in this country, and I think the good plays, good characters can be bent in so many different ways by good actors. So it was really piece by piece. There was one, we did come down quite late in this because a lot of things were changing with COVID. The difference that COVID has made to the company is that we've been casting very close to the productions so that people are actually able to take into account their life, the obstacles of COVID at the moment. I mean, I nearly lost Julian. You had to get yourself, he'd been down in Sydney doing a play and got stuck down south and had to then drive down to Coffs Harbour in order to fly in, and he quarantined to do it. That came down quite close, and so there have been impacts insofar as COVID, but interestingly, every actor in this is making their debut on the Queensland Theatre stage. It was actually a really lovely process sitting with Steve and hearing different, no, that can be a surprise.
Surprise. There are a few surprises that we won't spoil. Thank you for that question. It's a beautiful segue into the next part of the evening, which is congratulations, you all have a role this evening. We are going to record you as crowd. Well done, you've made it. You're making your debut too. I'm going to head over. Who is directing this? Julian? Lee?
Julian's got to go up the back and record it. I am going to direct you all. I'll be very kind about it. And if you feel a little bit traumatised and you come back 20 years from now, I've got Amanda Jolly in the room to witness to the fact that I've been very kind about this whole process. So there's a show within the show, which is actually, it's the embalming section of the play. Yes, there's a little show that is given about the embalming process. And our host for the evening comes out and has this whole little show that he does about it. I'm not going to give away the prop that he will be using to do that, but essentially there's a crowd response. Let me know when you're ready to go, Julian.
Yeah, hello everyone. What we might do is we might do a bit of a rough start, just so I can set levels and so forth. So, as Lee said, we finished show, so if I can get you all on the count of 3 to do our excitement, our show's about to start, and a presentator's about to
The
enter.
host is about to run on stage, so you've got, like, if there was a TV
It's like live
or
TV.
Exactly. Okay, ready?
Live TV.
And on 1, 2, 3.
Perfect, wonderful, you're all hired. Great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to record that, and we might do 2 takes if that's all right. So, on the count of 3, we might do that again. Oh, brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
It'll look much better when you finally come and see the show. Okay. No, that's okay. That's okay.
It sounded
Keep your
great.
mask on. That's cool. It sounded great.
I'm ready to
Very
go,
real.
thank you.
Okay, and our host will be arriving in 3, 2, 1. Welcoming on stage.
Steve Pirie!
Brilliant. Steve, would you want to do that again for us?
This is exactly what theatre is like.
This time, Steve. Jeez.
Get your
Let's
steps
go
up.
with feeling.
With feeling. And 3, 2, 1.
Steve Pirie!
Lovely, brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh my gosh,
So
you're all
then,
right.
We've got a couple more to do. Yes.
Okay, so the next thing is going to come on is this amazing demonstration prop is going to come out on stage. So what I need from you all is a ooh.
Shall we do that all as a test?
Okay, as a test. 1.
Great, perfect.
You have to not say great perfect right after because you'll have to edit yourself out.
Well, yeah, absolutely right. Can we also maybe get a couple of R's in there? So if maybe a handful of people, I don't know, a couple of R's.
So you have a choice. Yeah.
Shall we do that again? Thank you.
3.
Great, thank you. And can I grab a ooh? And one more time. Love it. Then we'll go on to our last one. Yeah.
Okay, there's a particularly vile moment, so I need some sort of like, yeah, or you can play around with this one a little bit. Like, imagine something particularly vile that's actually just about to happen. On 3, 2, 1.
Could we get maybe more into our guts? Something like something really gross.
Dig deep, everyone.
Yeah.
Really gross.
And 3.
One more time.
3, 2.
Thank you very
very much. That's it.
Well done, everyone. Thank you. Okay, keep that enthusiasm going. It's time for my favourite part of the subscriber briefing, and that is the raffle. Bring it on out. Ooh. Steve Pirie, the first one. Okay, because it's our last briefing, we have 2 prizes. The first one, the first one is a double pass to Dendy Cinemas, who have been a huge and amazing season supporter this year. So, Steve, who is the lucky winner?
Oh, okay. I have purple A31.
Oh, that's the winner! Oh! Stay there, stay in your seat. We will come to you. Okay, now for our major prize. With Jeanette, we're going to use you as our next person to pull it out. We need a new person. Fair. Yep, Jeanette. Okay, here we go. This is for a $50 voucher, food and beverage voucher to Bille Restaurant in West End. Very delicious. Okay.
It is purple A01.
Oh, the front row, well done. Stay where you are, we'll put that soon. Okay, thank you. Now, before I release you all tonight, you amazing cast, additional supporting cast of Return to the Dirt, I have to tell you, this is the end of our 2021 season. And next year, we are so excited where we're going to be taking you. So we're taking you from the Scotch-soaked drawing room of George and Martha in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf to the deserts of Afghanistan in First Casualty. And your season tickets are a passport to places you simply must visit with us in 2022. And they are available right now. Finally, thank you to the cast and crew of Return to the Dirt. I can say I have read this play, I have seen it read, and it is funny, wry, moving, and particularly bruising. It is, I believe, a small work of staggering genius, full of soul and plenty of heart. I cannot wait for all of you to experience this final work. It is an absolute triumph. So please thank the cast and the crew of Return to the Dirt. Safe travels home, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you at the theatre. Thank you.